the way forward. But with that, I'm going to hand back to you, to Griselda, because I know you got some headlines before we carry on the program with tonight's show.
Thank you very much, Jobe, as well as you, Shandu. We know that you'll be joining us throughout the rest of the program. And indeed, we will be unpacking that, speaking to a historian from the University of KwaZulu-Natal very shortly. Let's start with your headlines. The body of the AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini has arrived at the Kwakheto Mthandayo Royal Palace in Nongoma in northern KwaZulu-Natal. In other news, the police officers who were suspects in the killing of Mthokozisi Ntumba during last week's student protest made a brief appearance before the Johannesburg Magistrates Court today. A judgment has been reserved in the legal battle to unseal President Cyril Ramaphosa's CR17 campaign financial statements.
Wena wendlovu ayete abashongo la dumis abashongo la dumis abashongo wesuleli phezu bathi ushilo bandabakasho.
As we continue our rolling coverage, our reporters have been on the ground, Nongoma, for the majority of the day today, basically moving with the remains of the departed king from the local mortuary there to the royal palace. And of course, you would know that at this particular point, no media is allowed to film as the family is continuing with the traditional rituals at this particular point. And that's where I want to bring you in, Mzwandile Mbeche. At this particular point, we understand that the family is busy with those traditional rituals. This is quite significant, and it's such a private matter that you can't really even say much about what is expected to take place there. We'll speak to a historian very shortly and get a sense, but that explains to us the extent. Yeah,
you know, it's quite interesting, as you are saying, Griselda. Though, you know, we evolve and a number of things evolve, they are not necessarily done the way they used to be done. But if it were in the olden days, in fact, when the announcement was made that the king had departed, so in fact, in the olden days, it was supposed to be announced when everything had been concluded, because we're not supposed to know when he was buried, and then we were supposed to expect the announcement of the new king, because the king had departed, because there needed to be no vacuum at the time. But as we go and in a modern situation, so we try and adjust certain things. That is why they still want to keep to some of those important rituals, like not knowing what is happening, where he will be buried, and then of course a very limited number, the royal people, and of course Amaboto, the very, very select few. So they are somehow keeping some of those most important situations, because you know, this information needs to be kept very, very, very close, so that by, I guess, tomorrow or in the coming days, when the new announcement is made, so there are no leaks, unnecessary confusion that would have happened.
In fact, Priscilla, maybe come in there.
Sure.
A question I want to ask is why. How important is it, in particular to that point that you're speaking to? We understand that, of course, emandulo izinto bezihamba ngalolu hlelo. Inkosi bekunganyenyezelwa ukuthi inkosi sikhothembe. We saw when we heard of the news, SABC News actually said, look, we're not going to be speaking to analysts. We're not going to have guests on the show to come and, well, yes, the king has passed. Because this is something that we keep until Okulmela, the royal family in Ndlunkulu, comes in and officially speaks to the people, speaks to South Africa, speaks to Isizwe Sakazulu, and bears the news. And thereafter, it becomes public knowledge.
Absolutely, yes. Because, you know, in the past, these issues used to be very... In fact, to this day, there's a lot of tension by its very own nature. I mean, the king, the departed king now, you remember that he had to go into hiding, because it's always been like this. In fact, if we just go back, This is King Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu, kaSolomon, kaDinizulu, kaCetshwayo, kaMpande, kaSenzangakhona. Then Senzangakhona wazala uDingane noShaka. And Dingane, Shaka, King Dingane, King Shaka, and King Mpande, these are brothers. And then what happened?
To King Shaka.
What happened to King Shaka? What happened to King Dingane? And then, of course, Mpande. So all those situations are taken into account.
Yes.
Even when the current king took over, remember his father died in 1968, but he only took over in 1971 because he was still too young. But in that time, he had to be kept safe,
yes.
Which does explain to you that these matters are quite sensitive and are treated as such.
Let's talk on that fact of the king. I do not want to say he was in exile. I know we use the word exile, or he was in a place of safety. We're not sure. Some say he was in Swaziland, some say, or Eswatini, apologies. Some say Bekhona lapha ekhaya in the northern province, in Limpopo. The importance again of him going into that hiding, if I can call it that, gaining the knowledge that he had to, leaving his kingdom, because it was his kingdom by rights. I know it was given to the prince to carry on whilst he was away. That part of the history.
Okay, remember, he was still too young to take over. In fact, I think somewhere along the lines we'll speak about Izibongo. Izibongo, the praise singing?
Yes.
They normally tell the history.
They actually tell a story.
Part of what is being said in those Zibongo, they are basically saying, wena owabalekela owasiwa kwadadewenu unonhlanhla kuMandebele niyadela niMandebele eniye nabona izinyane likandaba. So which means when the time came, so he was taken to a place of safety to KwaNdebele. So Izibongo also, they are not just, they have a context.
Yes.
So they are telling you, and they are supposed to be very honest. Izibongo are not supposed to tell you what you want to know. They are supposed to be very direct, even if they are going to talk about you having done something wrong. Izibongo are supposed to do that.
In true form of isiZulu itself, I mean, I always say to people that isiZulu, more than a language, it's a culture, it's a way of life, because even the way you speak, in a sense, it's not necessarily what you say. Certain things, the emphasis you put in certain words is important. Coming back then to, coming back to then, we saw this during this week. The past 5 days, we had new names, new words to our viewers, if we can call it that. Komanje, we heard Crisella speaking about ukutshalwa kwenkosi. We spoke about ukukhothama kwenkosi. And we saw on the social media platforms throughout the week, in fact, just today, there was a debate about the word that we used, saying the king today, uzotshalwa, in direct translation, ngesingisi, we're saying will be planted. Now, the arguments that a lot of us had, saying, no, planted is the wrong word, maybe interred. Can you give us a story behind that? Because it'll be interesting, I'm sure, for our viewers to understand why in isiZulu we speak about inkosi ukuthi iyatshalo.
Okay. Okay, first things first. You know, colloquially or even informally, we normally say isiZulu asitoliko.
Yes.
Basically, you say you can't translate or interpret the rich Zulu words. So in this instance, here is a classic example, because you do try to explain, but it's not very clear.
Yes.
But when we're talking about ukutshala, so in the literal sense, ukutshala is to plant. So, and then if you plant, so you plant because you want something to come
grow
up. So when the king has passed on, so we say, because remember, when the king has passed on, a new king will be named.
Yes.
So which means he has just transitioned, he has played his role, but because we have planted him, so his seed will soon emerge. That ukutshalwa is in that context. So, but remember, we try to accommodate everyone, because South Africa is for everyone.
Yes.
We are not only dealing with the Zulu people here, we are dealing with everyone, and everyone must understand what is it that we mean. So some of these words would be very difficult to translate. We can help by just explaining what they were supposed to mean.
In fact, I would even go as far as saying a king does not die. The reason why we say inkosi ayishoni or ayifi. We say the king bows out or bows down because when you bow, you rise once again.
Yes, yes.
And Ukutshala in this instance would be the king's dynasty will live on within his subjects and within his lineage.
Yes, yes,
Therefore, he will never die. He will always be inkosi. In English, they say, long live the king, long live the queen. In Zulu, say, inkosi iyatsalwa ngoba iyaqhubekela phambili.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, throughout the evening, we'll be trying to do this educational insight into Zulu and isilo samabandla. Today, kusihlwa isilo samabandla siyatshalwa. We saw umzimba uyile wakhetha umthandayo kwaNongoma. But for now, let's hand matters back to Griselda Lewis. I know Griselda is speaking to ifundiswa ezikhona ezosichazela kancane. Griselda?
Thank you very much indeed, Jobe, as well as you, Ushandu. We know at this hour that the Royal Zulu family is conducting private ceremonies and rituals ahead of the ukutshalwa of the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu later tonight. This, of course, will be followed by a memorial on Thursday, which will be addressed by President Cyril Ramaphosa in Nongoma in northern KwaZulu-Natal. And, of course, we'll try to speak to our reporters again, but not too close to the Royal Palace. You would know that we are no longer allowed to broadcast there as those rituals are currently underway. But let me bring in a historian from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Professor Siawukele Ngubane. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time at this particular moment. So, look, quite a lot unfolding this afternoon. Many perhaps who would not understand, rich Zulu culture. But, first things first, we saw the remains of the departed king basically being moved from the mortuary to the royal palace, being accompanied by amabutho as well as maidens. Talk to us about the significance of that.
A king is always surrounded by amabutho. Since his installation in 1971, amabutho were part of and parcel of the ceremony. And the significance of amabutho is that they are part of his entourage. Wherever he goes, you may remember that when he visited Wales, he was with almost 200 amabutho. So wherever he goes with amabutho because he establishes the regiment. He chooses a certain age of men to become official regiment. So they are part and parcel of his tenure as the king. And if the new king comes in, he will also use his regiment to him wherever he goes.
All right, Prof, I want to talk about the legacy of His Majesty. Hailed as a peaceful man who was instrumental in resolving conflicts, I would say, between, Africans and Indians. I want to talk a bit about that. That is something that many have spoken about since we learned of his departing. That, apart from his legacy, what more can we remember him for?
I think the other thing that we'll remember him for is the promotion of culture, Zulu culture and Zulu identity. Because he was the custodian of the Zulu culture, and this is what he is going to be remembered for. And also, there are some of the ceremonies and that were not. I'm driving, that's why I have a problem because I'm on the road. But he was the custodian, or he is the custodian of the Zulu culture. And this is what he's going to be remembered for. And also, he was a man that was religious as well. So he believed in God, and he would promote the spirit of reconciliation. That's why he will embrace all religious groups and people from all walks of life.
And I think while at this particular point, we're still going through this particular process, whoever then, I guess, does take over the reins would probably need to embody the very same principles that the departed Majesty did in keeping the Zulu nation together, that rich history being there, and being somebody of a peaceful nature, as many described.
Yes, I think one may say that the new king that will get into his shoes is already groomed for the position, so he will have to embrace what the king has stood for during his tenure. So we expect that the position or the seat, we call it Islalo, is going to be respected, and the new king will have to embrace what the fallen king has been standing for all these years, almost 50 years now.
Prof, I think we're going to leave you there. We do understand that you're driving. Prof. Saukele Ngubane, who's a historian at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We're still trying to locate one of our reporters who is Nongoma. You would know, of course, that the media is not allowed to broadcast this particular part of the ceremonies as the family is conducting those private rituals. We'll try to connect with one of our reporters who is not too far away from there as well. We'll try to get you that as soon as possible. But let's go here for now. The AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini is one of the most influential traditional leaders in Southern Africa. The late South African President Nelson Mandela described him as one of the greatest kings in the land. We take a look at his reign.
King Goodwill Zwelithini, the longest reigning monarch in South Africa, ascended to the throne in 1971 after the death of his father, King Cyprian KaBhekuzulu kaSolomoni. He became the 8th monarch of the Zulu Kingdom. His grandfather, the infamous King Shaka kaSenzangakhona, forged one of the most recognized empires, AmaZulu, on the continent. During his brief reign, more than 100 chiefdoms were brought together to become one kingdom. In the earlier years on the throne, the king, then in his 20s, quietly led his subjects while being groomed further. And while he remained non-partisan, the political climate at the time made it difficult for him to avoid being drawn into politics. The black majority were pushing back against the oppressive apartheid system, and in KwaZulu-Natal the situation had taken a turn for the worst. In the 80s, the monarch was drawn into controversy over the state of the then KwaZulu and the government's plans for it to become a fully independent homeland. South Africa was on the brink of a new era, preparing to usher in democracy. The late former President Nelson Mandela met with the king on several occasions over the situation in KwaZulu-Natal. This led to the two forming a strong bond. In a speech delivered by President Mandela at the king's 50th birthday, he paid tribute to the militant anti-colonialist struggles of the Zulu royal house, a legacy which he said dated back to the days of kings like Shaka. Mandela praised the monarch for his refusal to collaborate with the apartheid authorities when the then Bantustan policy was introduced. The two continued to work together in the early 90s to quell the political violence that had spread across the province and claimed thousands of lives.
My message to those of you involved in this battle of brother against brother is this: take your guns, your knives, and your pangas and throw them into the sea.
Throughout the years, the king continued to work with and support the government. At times, he was the voice of reason. Government saw the king as key to peace, stability, growth and development in the province. Government and political party leaders kept him abreast of important developments in the province and country.
And Your Majesty we are going to work very hard to forge the unity that you so want to see in the ANC, the unity that the majority of our people so dearly want to see.
As the EFF, we recognize traditional leadership. As the EFF, we are ready to work with the traditional leadership, and we're officially also introducing ourselves. We've handed over our presence. We received a beautiful counseling from the King, because he's not just the King, he's our father, he's our elder.
As the custodian of Zulu heritage and culture, some of King Goodwill Zwelithini's biggest milestones were reviving old age traditional ceremonies. He merged cultural norms with the modern way of life. In the early 2000s, when the HIV and AIDS pandemic ravaged the country, KwaZulu-Natal became the epicenter of the disease. Government scrambled to get the situation under control. The King took a leading role in the fight against HIV and AIDS. In 2009, he announced that he would be reviving male circumcision and that he wanted the procedure to be conducted at health facilities.
But his main contribution to me, which is a legacy that is known all over the world, where he made a very prominent announcement that the male circumcision revived, but he would like it done medically. Why is he saying that? His Majesty went on to say this culture was taught by our king, King Shaka, 200 years ago, because King Shaka did not want men who were not available to fight the wars of resistance, the dispossession of our land, and therefore he needs all men to be available and ready to fight the wars. He then stopped this culture. Our king, our reigning king, then said, we have a new war, a war against HIV and AIDS. And the king went on to say, I'm informed that men, if they are circumcised, have a 50% reduction chance of transmitting a virus from themselves to their partners.
The King's decision made global headlines and received commendation from international bodies such as the World Health Organization.
We never had a single man or a boy who died through this culture from the time we started in 2010 until in May of 2018, when we announced to our king that we have circumcised 1 million men.
But he didn't stop there. He also supported the revival of the controversial practice of virginity testing for young girls and the annual reed dance ceremony where young maidens present reeds to the king as a sign of their purity. For the king, the ceremony was more than just discouraging sexual activity, but an opportunity to interact with young girls and instill moral values. Each year, the event was held with a theme that would address current issues in the country.
He provides a platform for them to have a voice. They address His Majesty on that platform. And besides that, it keeps them together. But if we go deep into the purpose and the objective of Umhlanga, Umhlanga is part of moral regeneration. Because when he's there, he addresses them, and he also advises them on how they should live their lives. And besides that, they have a chance to be introduced to Zulu culture.
And in keeping the heritage alive, Umkhoswelembe, a traditional event that honors the life and legacy of King Shaka as the founder of the Zulu nation, became an annual commemoration.
What he has done, he revived history. You will recall that we have King Shaka's Day, which he started to commemorate Ilembe, Elekamanya Malembe Khalipa, who was the founder of the Zulu nation. And besides that, that commemoration has spread throughout the country. The whole South Africa celebrated 24th of September, and it is through him. And that celebration alone, it brings people of all walks, Zulus and non-Zulus, even people from Swaziland, Mpumalanga, and all over, even from the Eastern Cape, they do come and attend this ceremony. So he is a unifier.
The king's reign, though, was not without controversy. At times, he came under fire for statements that he made during his public events. The king was known for speaking his mind. The Human Rights Commission was called upon several times to investigate the king for homophobic comments and even hate speech. The monarch also faced much scrutiny and criticism for his lavish lifestyle. The KZN government will annually allocate millions of rands to the royal household to support the king and his family. King Goodwill Zwelithini no doubt leaves a lasting legacy. Ayanda Mhlongo, SABC News, Durban.
Thank you very much, Ayanda, for that. Let's take a recap once again of tonight's top stories. The body of the AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini has arrived at the Kwaketo Mthandayo Royal Place in Nongoma in northern KwaZulu-Natal. In other news, the police officers who were suspects in the killing of Mthokozi Sintumba during last week's student protest made a brief appearance before the Johannesburg Magistrates Court today. Judgment has been reserved in the legal battle to unseal President Cyril Ramaphosa's CR17 campaign financial statements.
Inabenkashana mezephuzumla sakameva nabaqobo flanga edolo sayiza shela inkomo soshaka nesuruka mageba Zulu wakhona umagebe elanya undaba elanya ujama kwathi ujama saluseza khona salumudla sasojisa kwathi senza khona salushaka ushaka elanya udingane elanya umpande kwathi umpande sacetshwa salishingane kwacetshwa zadinuzulu Solomon saluBhekuzulu saluswelithini ngithi nabe kashana mezephuzumla sakameva nabaqamla ngenkomba ifusa umdlebe lahlilwa soshangana nabe kona ethi inkohlelo simashiya kushawusula zashana impi yakhe isibula ndaba lashela uPeter different ndodana ke kwamabhunu nabe kozulu umnyama okuthanda ukwazi inkomo zamadoda Besilo. Wena wedlovu bayede ushange sabuthi ushange usasemashobeni utekula abafazi bawonomgabi babetekula behleze emlovini bethi ushaka ibusa abayinkosi ekathi kunyane zawunethezeka udlungwane kandaba udlungwane ombelebele odlunge emanqulubeni kwazi kwasemanquluma asabikelana ilembe leqamanye amalebho khali phakalo unodumo ehlezi kamenzi ushaka sishaka njengamanzi umlilo uthathele kamjwana kandaba umlilo oshisa obuhanguhangu oshisa ikhofesi emabedlana kwakwashanda isodlebe inkomo ekhala emthotsheni isosonke sizwe.
If you like nice things
inkosi abandebeleni ubhejana odlabakayise phuma siqiwini kade bekuvalele ungalonde gagabela hayi ngangezawuyise yebo sigqutswana sabethi bakwalula ndaba kuphelele inqulwini eyakhinte.
All right, so the royal Zulu family is at this hour conducting private ceremonies and rituals ahead of the ukutshalwa of the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu later tonight. This will be followed by a memorial on Thursday, which will be addressed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. So Nongoma came to a complete standstill today as the Amabutho accompanied the body of the late king, the departed king, from the mortuary to the palace KwaKeto Mthandayo. Meanwhile, AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini was one of the most influential traditional leaders in Southern Africa. The late South African President Nelson Mandela described him as one of the greatest kings in the land. We take a look at his reign.
King Goodwill Zwelithini, the longest reigning monarch in South Africa, ascended to the throne in 1971 after the death of his father, King Cyprian Bhekuzulu kaSolomoni. He became the 8th monarch of the Zulu Kingdom. His grandfather, the infamous King Shaka kaSenzangakhona, forged one of the most recognized empires, AmaZulu, on the continent. During his brief reign, more than 100 chiefdoms were brought together to become one kingdom. In the earlier years on the throne, the king, then in his 20s, quietly led his subjects while being groomed further. And while he remained non-partisan, the political climate at the time made it difficult for him to avoid being drawn into politics. The black majority were pushing back against the oppressive apartheid system, and in KwaZulu-Natal the situation had taken a turn for the worst. In the 80s, the monarch was drawn into controversy over the state of the then KwaZulu and the government's plans for it to become a fully independent homeland. South Africa was on the brink of a new era, preparing to usher in democracy. The late former President Nelson Mandela met with the king on several occasions over the situation in KwaZulu-Natal. This led to the two forming a strong bond. In a speech delivered by President Mandela at the king's 50th birthday, he paid tribute to the militant anti-colonialist struggles of the Zulu royal house, a legacy which he said dated back to the days of kings like Shaka. Mandela praised the monarch for his refusal to collaborate with the apartheid authorities when the then Bantustan policy was introduced. The two continued to work together in the early 90s to quell the political violence that had spread across the province and claimed thousands of lives.
My message to those of you involved in this battle of brother against brother is this. Take your guns, your knives, and your pangas and throw them into the sea.
Throughout the years, the king continued to work with and support the government. At times, he was the voice of reason. Government saw the king as key to peace, stability, growth and development in the province. Government and political party leaders kept him abreast of important developments in the province and country.
And Your Majesty, we are going to work very hard to forge the unity that you so want to see in the ANC, the unity that the majority of our people so dearly want to see.
As the EFF, we recognize traditional leadership. As the EFF, we are ready to work with the traditional leadership, and we're officially also introducing ourselves. We've handed over our presence. We received a beautiful counseling from the king, because he's not just the king, he's our father, he's our elder.
As the custodian of Zulu heritage and culture, some of King Goodwill Zwelithini's biggest milestones were reviving old age traditional ceremonies. He merged cultural norms with the modern way of life. In the early 2000s, when the HIV and AIDS pandemic ravaged the country, KwaZulu-Natal became the epicenter of the disease. Government scrambled to get the situation under control. The king took a leading role in the fight against HIV and AIDS. In 2009, he announced that he would be reviving male circumcision and that he wanted the procedure to be conducted at health facilities.
But his main contribution to me, which is a legacy that is known all over the world, where he made a very prominent announcement that the male circumcision revived, but he would like it done medically. Why is he saying that? His Majesty went on to say, this culture was taught by our king, King Shaka, 200 years ago, because King Shaka did not want men who were not available to fight the wars of resistance, the dispossession of our land, and therefore he needs all men to be available and ready to fight the wars. He then stopped this culture. Our king, our reigning king, then said, we have a new war, a war against HIV and AIDS. And the king went on to say, I'm informed that men, if they are circumcised, have a 50% reduction chance of transmitting a virus from themselves to their partners.
The king's decision made global headlines and received commendation from international bodies such as the World Health Organization.
We never had a single man or a boy who died through this culture from the time we started in 2010 until in May of 2018, when we announced to our king that we have circumcised 1 million men.
But he didn't stop there. He also supported the revival of the controversial practice of virginity testing for young girls and the annual reed dance ceremony where young maidens present reeds to the king as a sign of their purity. For the king, the ceremony was more than just discouraging sexual activity, but an opportunity to interact with young girls and instill moral values. Each year, the event was held with a theme that would address current issues in the country.
He provides a platform for them to have a voice. They address His Majesty on that platform. And besides that, it keeps them together. But if we go deep into the purpose and the objective of Umhlanga, Umhlanga is part of moral regeneration, because when he's there, he addresses them and he also advises them on how they should live their lives. And besides that, they have a chance to be introduced to Zulu culture.
And in keeping the heritage alive, Umkhoswelembe, a traditional event that honors the life and legacy of King Shaka as the founder of the Zulu nation, became an annual commemoration.
What he has done, he revived history. You will recall that we have King Shaka's Day, which he started to commemorate Ilembe, Elekamanya Malembe Khalipa, who was the founder of the Zulu nation. And besides that, that commemoration has spread throughout the country. The whole South Africa celebrated 24th of September, and it is through him. And that celebration alone, it brings people of all walks, Zulus and non-Zulus, even people from Swaziland, Mpumalanga, and all over, even from the Eastern Cape, they do come and attend this ceremony. So he is a unifier.
The king's reign, though, was not without controversy. At times, he came under fire for statements that he made during his public events. The king was known for speaking his mind. The Human Rights Commission was called upon several times to investigate the king for homophobic comments and even hate speech. The monarch also faced much scrutiny and criticism for his lavish lifestyle. The KZN government will annually allocate millions of rands to the royal household to support the king and his family. King Goodwill Zwelithini no doubt leaves a lasting legacy. Ayanda Mhlongo, SABC News, Durban.
Meanwhile, residents of Nkandla in northern KwaZulu-Natal are sad that they won't be able to attend the memorial service of the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu. Nkandla has a rich historical link with the royal family through Inkosi Skananda Shezi, who served 4 AmaZulu kings. So the grave of King Zwelithini's great-great-grandfather, King Cetwayo, lies in the Nkandla forest.
Nkandla, popularly known today as home to former President Jacob Zuma, historically the area has connections with AmaZulu kings. Late local chief Inkosi Skananda Shezi served 4 kings, Shaka, Dingane, Pande and Cetshwayo. Skananda harbored King Cetshwayo at Nkandla Forest, where he died and was buried.
Some battles which were fought here by Inkosi Skananda, which are historical to the Zulu nation and to the royal family. And there is even a stone which was used by Amakhosi here to sit, because it's on the top of the hill, which they were using it. When they were sitting there, they were able to see most of the land surrounding Nkandla.
Mbongeleni Ngubane is an informal trader in the town of Nkandla. He wants this history of AmaZulu kings and Inkosi Skananda Shezi preserved.
It's said that the history of King Cetshwayo is not preserved well here, where he is buried. It's also said that the items next to his grave disappeared.
Residents here say they feel connected to the AmaZulu royal family and are hurt that they cannot travel to Nongoma to bid the king farewell. King Goodwill Zwelithini passed on last Friday. His memorial service will be held under COVID-19 regulations.
It's said that we can't visit the palace to offer our condolences.
We love our king, as he is the only king we have known during our time, and it's sad that he left us.
King Goodwill unveiled this monument here in Nkandla in 1980, 96 years after the death of King Cetshwayo. The Nkandla municipality has organized public viewing for Thursday's memorial service of King Goodwill Zwelithini. Mlondi Khatebe, SABC News, Nkandla.
The Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, CONTRALESA, has hailed King Goodwill Zwelithini for flying the flag of royalty and his ocean of wisdom, as they described. CONTRALESA says the king would also be remembered for his respect for people. SABC News reporter Tumelo Machogo spoke to the president of CONTRALESA, Kgoshi Mokoena, about the life of King Goodwill Zwelithini.
Also here we've been hearing a lot of people speaking actually highly of the king, about the information and that they have learned from him, but also a lot of respect that they've been saying that they've been passing towards the community. But let's speak to the president of CONTRALESA, Kgoshi Mokoena. Kgoshi, obviously today is not a very good day for a lot of people, especially for the Zulu nation, but not only for the Zulu nation, but for the country as a large, especially for royal families. And also what are you as CONTRALESA, what are the messages that you have learned from the king?
Thank you very much. This is a sad day indeed. As CONTRALESA, we learned that when you are a leader of his caliber, you need to be humble. You need to respect anyone. That's what the king was. He was a person, when you meet him, when you part from him, you have gained something. As CONTRALESA, we used to bounce some ideas with him, in particular the issues of land, where he had passion about land. We are so sorry that we had to lose such a leader of his caliber. He was a visionary. And many of us, so to speaking, but the kind of respect I had for him cannot be measured with anything. And he respects everyone else. As people who have got a tendency as a traditional leadership, where we don't want to shake hands with our own people. But with His Majesty King Zwelithini, when you meet him, he's the one who will stretch his hand first to greet you. something that some of us are failing to do. We're going to miss him a lot as a Contralesa.
That and also being he's been a king for 50 years, and obviously that with that leadership he has imparted to you guys as the other Khoshis and other kings across the nation. But what are you guys going to take forward to make sure that his legacy is not only forgotten but is continued, and then his ideals of life, especially you talk about the land, and it's a very important issue about the land issue. How are you guys going to continue to make sure that those ideals that he wanted to impart on others is going to continue, and going to make sure that the country become what he wanted the country to be, and also in keeping with the tradition and the culture?
I want to give you a typical example. He assisted all traditional leaders in the country by leading a discussion with the Motsepe Foundation, where he requested Ntate Motsepe that he assist traditional leadership in terms of boreholes in their respective areas. As I'm talking to you, geologists sent by Mr. Motsepe were all over the country visiting traditional leaders. All these were his initiative. Now, a person like him, we're going to miss him a lot because, for example, when we call our meetings as Contralesa in KZN, we'll request the king to come and bless our meetings. Definitely, he will honor us by his presence, or to send someone very senior in the royalty to come and address us. A person like that who was fighting corruption with all he had, we're going to miss him. Many of us are easy to be bored as traditional leadership, which is the sad situation in our country. We cannot really compare His Majesty with any other person. We're going to miss him a lot.
All right, I want to bring in Dr. Betlindaba Mkhize now. He's the founder of the Umsamo Institute. He joins me now. Doc, a very good evening to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I want to talk about the burial process and the role of the royal family. For many who don't understand Zulu culture, what is likely to happen in this particular instance?
Thank you very much to the viewers, as well as thank you very much to the studio. First of all, what we have to understand about the burial processes in an African context is that it consists of two things. It consists of isiko, something that is done by the whole nation, like for instance, like in Zulus. And then we have something called usiko, which is particularly for that particular family. Now, why I'm mentioning that and starting my conversation with that one is because King Zwelithini, he is the one who said in his family, I'm going to do something that my forefathers and my father Cyprien KaBhekuzulu never done. That in my family, the burial, whoever that passes away, will have to be buried at night. It has happened to two of his sons, his late sons, and hence it is actually happening to him. So we must understand that first of all. And then the second thing is that in our tradition is that people who actually take the forefront, it's men most of the time, and then women to follow behind and so on. Not because of undermining them. No, it's not about that. Now, with him, as we know that he is coming from a tradition and a culture of the warriors, of Amabutho and so on. Hence, I think that is why the decision was that it must only be male people who must attend the funeral. Now, I want to mention something that was happening the whole day today. When you view the whole thing that was happening on TV, was that it was the Virgin Ladies, Izintombi, that was leading Amabutho. Why? It was because of cleanliness. Because they are still clean and they haven't touched by a man. And therefore, why we was doing that? Because that was the signifying that we have, in other words, when he arrives to his ancestors, nothing must disturb him. He must be as clean as possible. Hence, maybe he gets touched by male. Now, we all know that women, they go through their so-called menstruation and so on. And our belief is that it makes them maybe dirty for that particular period. Maybe that is the case. But what we're actually going to expect here is that as they actually mentioned that he must be buried at night, so it will be male only. Somebody else asked me in one of the interviews today, said, why particularly at night? We must remember, we have, okay, the king is a person during his time, any king. He lives through his nyanga, he has got intellects, he has got his own mutis and whatever to make him so on. But remember, those people can be sorcerers later. So in other words, abathakathi bakhona. We have to protect iliba lakhe. We have to hide where he has been buried. And then maybe it can be said, maybe it can be said where it's lying after maybe 6 months or a year, whatever. But for the time being, we have to protect that for the purposes of the family and for the purposes of the nation at large.
Well put there, Doctor. It sums up a lot, in particular, for the viewer who may not understand Zulu culture quite well. But I also want to talk about the legacy here, in that, there were a number of cultures, if I may, that, the departed king had also revived after his coronation. I want to talk a bit about that and how significant that is if you look at His Excellency's legacy. His Majesty, I beg your pardon.
You know, he played a significant role as a king. For instance, let's start back from Shaka. During the times of King Shaka, it was unfortunate that Shaka was actually assassinated. And then when Dingaan took over from Shaka, he took over from hard times. And he had to fight with the Boers, with the divided Zulu kingdom, which was led to his defeat, and so on and so on. And Bande, who ruled for over 30 years, what actually happened was that even the kingdom could not be brought together, but Shaka was trying to conquer all the small nations so as to create the Zulu nation and so on and so on. Yeah. And then now, if you look into Cetshwayo, sadly enough, is that colonization was very aggressive at that time, and it was worse. Yeah. And now, Zulu, who succeeded Cetshwayo in 1884, who ruled until his death in 1913, you will find that he was actually operating during the trying times and during the Bambatas, the poll tax revelation, the British sentenced him to St. Helena, and all those kinds of things. Now, the king, first of all, when he came to power during the apartheid times, where actually there was the racist state, and determined to punish any genuine agitation for a united, democratic, and non-sexist South Africa. So those were difficult times. And at the same time, he came to power where most of the Zulu people lost their traditions, lost their customs, lost some of their beautiful things. Yeah. And what we are trying to say here is that he took over now not as a king per se, but as a head of state, not of army, but at the head of the Zulu people, a nation. Understand that, a nation only in cultural terms and not really. In short, today, there is no Zulu nation in democracy, and the apartheid state only promoted Zulu nationalism as a way of dividing. It was not the recognition of political or military territory and independence. So he had to be that is actually overlooking for everyone in this country. Remember this. Just take an instance where the foreigners were being beaten, being killed. He immediately and said, it is not about being a foreigner in this country or being whatever, but it is about us as African people, us as black. So I am here not only to unify the Zuluness, but I'm here to be an ambassador in the world and the peacemaker, and also show the people who are we. That is why he brought back the issue, he brought back Umhlanga, he brought back the so-called all the embracement, as you heard from the previous speaker that was actually talking ahead of me in the very same time.
And I recall that time, Doctor, when South Africa was at a very heightened time of xenophobic violence as well. And having visited the hostels at the time and speaking to Izinduna at the time, once His Majesty had spoken, everyone would listen to the instruction that he had given. And I guess this is going to have to be, I won't say a challenge, but where whosoever then takes over the reins would obviously need to have, that kind of attitude towards solving some of the challenges that or assisting South Africa with some of the challenges that it experiences, where he can.
I think it's not only a matter of solving the challenge, but you'll have to go beyond.
Yes.
Remember, the king was in his 70s. Now, the challenge in our society now is about young people. The young people wants to listen to the young voice. I think whenever who will be his successor will be amongst his sons, I'm not too sure, but a young person. A person who will understand the 21st century issues as per his father, who had to understand the past from King Shaka up to today. But the successor now, his son, will have to understand what is actually happening today. Why am I saying that? Look into our young people today. Look at our we have lost our culture, we've lost our tradition, we've lost our things. We find that at shops, we are addressing our children in English, whereas the English-speaking people or African-speaking people, they will never address theirs in our own mother tongues. All those sorts of things. Even our own government have neglected the bringing back and the celebration of our cultures and traditions through their arts and culture department, to me, which is a waste of money and energy because it hasn't done nothing. So therefore, the king who will take over, he must actually fight not only the politicians, the government, and say, why are we neglecting what we are, and also so that the next generation will leave those things.
Very outspoken on issues of land, and I guess that is part of what that legacy will be, and also whosoever then does take over would also need to be, like you say, involved in issues of young people and identify with the challenges of South Africa today and have voice pertaining to that. Is that correct?
When you are touching about land, you are touching me on a very, very hard spot. Now, I always say to people, when you are crying about bringing back the land, what is it that you are talking about? Are you talking about the land itself, the soil, or are you talking about the wealth that was lost with the land? When a white man took the land, he didn't only take the land, he took the wealth in terms of, one, our ancestors' graves where they were lying. He took the land where our cattle were grazing. He took the land where we could do the plowing and so on. For instance, if you are telling me that you are bringing back Umlambo Munye, are you bringing me back the graves of my ancestors, their spirits, where they are lying? How many pieces of land have been brought back to the people today, but they are renting them out to the very same white people because of the lack of understanding? My argument is that let's not politicize the issue of the land. Let's make it be a spiritual issue. Let's make it be part of ourselves. In our African isiZulu, we speak of inxuluma kumbe inxiwa. Mawalahla inxiwa, when you lost the origin where your forefathers were, you are lost completely. Hence, black people are lost today because we lost the wealth. That is why it's the other races or nations that are actually wealthier than us, because we lost impande, of which I think the challenge of the successor will have to think better than anyone else in terms of the land. The Ngonyama Trust, I think, that was the understanding. So therefore, if you are giving a young man a farm, say, I am empowering this young man, are you bringing him back the land? Not at all. Where is the wealth? Our land was the wealth. To me, what we must mourn about is the wealth that was carried by the land, not only the bare land or the thin land.
Dr. Bedlindaba Mkhize, thank you very much. I wish we had more time to look at this. The founder of the Umsamo Institute, thank you very much indeed for joining us on The Full View this evening.
Inabe nkashana mezephuza umlasa kameva nabaqobo flanga etolo sayiza shela inkomo soshakane suruka mageba Zulu wakhona umagebe lanya undaba lanya ujama kwathi ujama saluseza khona salumudla sasojisa kwathi senza khona salushaka ushaka lanya udingane lanya umpande kwathi umpande sacetshwa salishingane kwacetshwa salidinusulu Solomon saluBhekuzulu saluswelithini ngithi nabe kashana mezephuza umlasa kamefa nabaqambula ngenkomba ifusa umdlebe lahlilwa soshangane nabe kona ethi inkohlelo simashiya kushawusula zashana impi yakhe isibula ndaba lashela uPeter different udana ke kwamabhunu naba koZulu umnyama okuthanda ukhoza inkomo zamadoda inabesilo wena wedlovu bayede ushange sabo ushabo ushange usasemashobeni utekula abafazi bawo nomgabi babetekula behleze emlovini bethi ushaka ibusa abankosi ekathi kunyane zawunethezeka udlungwane kaNdaba udlungwane ombelebele odlunge emanqulubeni kwazi kwasemanquluma sabikelana ilembe leqamanyama levocal phakalo unodumo ehlezi kamemvi ushaka sishaka njengamanzi umlilo uthathele kamjwana kaNdaba umlilo oshisa obuhanguhangu oshisa ikhofesi emabedlana kwakwashana isodlebe inkomo ekhala emthojeni isosonke sizwe lokulila iswena kumancenge ezokwakhali iswena ngududwa seliyengweni inyathe ejama umfoto phezulu komzimfubu azamaphoda isaba nokuhlela intethe khonade somkhoto abalandela emkhulu abashisa inqini imbewu bashiya emahlangeni izolo sele emanqiweni amaqhega sele emsileni isiquse mithi iphenduka umbhedo wazabheka phezulu unomakhweli ngonyama umahlomo ohlathi nojengo ohlanya uhlaliswe emehlweni amadoda noma shofshofu kasenza khona undaba sithi afeke senza khona ugaqala ubovu nasekuphathweni ubholo qobaza ulukaniswa ngekodwa bhasi kona nditombile ikhishwa lemhlapha wona bebisele emthandeni beyisela bethe sikesina nentolo sehla kanti uzaphathwa impendelweni ufuma ufumana kanti ufuma ufumana luphephe udlungwana wafumana uvumelene ugodolosi ethi ngonganeno kwanathi kanti kodwa wantombasana amazi babile ngwabongayo ngeke kampandela balekadunga komo bethu uxoxana entanyeni akeni sibisele basenkondeni bethu uhila bomhlaba amahlokohloko kwafa amasoko ucwephe wabuza isindlela kudunjwa engabe ibuza umbosana wadlulela nomaganga lafika iqhudela mvimbela odabule kubusana phezulu wakhethela udwendo lamaswa wadlula kumcophe goduka ungasobathi vale sonjalosi abasho kona kaNdaba basho kunyoko umblase okuyena uvale ngonyama endlini lapho ilanga lisensizwa khethe phezulu lantsatsa ilanga liphahleni ngemsebe ngoba ilanga lasemthandeni okhwezela abantwana zulu elinyama lesehlomile ngabathala kuphela baza kusibalekela ngudunjwa wadela imthandanisile owakha amanqo phezulu kothukela lapho ucushwa isilo ngombowana weza nokhungwa weza nongoma izembe imambe emnyama endle mkomalande uthiloyele odanda khaluluthi obegodola amacingo ngonyameni osihlandlo kwagcaba amaphakwankwana basole basokhokho bankose bayijekisa izibolo bebemuwesa saconsa amanti bebemuwesa sinkweni simfumo isinkweni simfumo zasala sikhexela imlomo bebekhalu sesasa amadungweni isikomo zikasayo sabuya nezingamafongosi ezayise ngendiko amafele obesiqhobolo sikamatya senkandla aphephela izindlovu lapho liphendula aphephela nophosha buthelesi aphephela nohlandlo wamkhisi izindlovu sabuya silibalekela omthombano obambe ukuphuza kongazi kagangeteka ngazi kaphoswa kudliwana isimapa umlungu uzwa singoje sabafobo ingoje ilungiselana nyathi amsengama masibulo nyathi ejama umkhoto phezu komzimfubu asa amampondo ayisaba nokuyehlela intethe egolade somkhoto amalandela umkhulu washisa inqini imbewu bashiya emahlangeni izolosele emanqiweni amaqhega sele emzileni isiquse mithi iphenduka umbhedo wazabheka phezulu inyoni ehlesi yethe sahle sinyebe ehlesi undaba ohle mhlawumbe ngiyabahwebi ungelekele kalingana ndaba wena omkhulu kakhulu ndaba ogangeso lakho ungangomphehlela nomaqhokazi ihlahle esimilo khala kumaqhokazi esahlela amanqumalo namandwana umqanga bhodwa komkaba ekajama umqambi kozama evete ndemusi nize ningisize emaphita nonqingelele khiphe enkomo yini imnika afunde uqheza nimnika ukandilo lokuzibhela osifuba sinenqaba ide kaNdaba ngoba nentethela semalangeni undaba ngiyambuka ngiyameba ngimbuka kohle siyembezi bangathi ngibuka isihlahla somdlebe igujile kamdla kaligwegwe kijeza abasimbe ngoma undaba udude emanqulubeni udlungwana ngonamthekeleli ugungubela njengolandlela ukuze kuseligugubela izwi ledume phezulu semampondweni ladumela ufaka umuntu wangqungqusha banloyelwe emesikhaleni senyoka wayebabuso bomfana kwenkwezende kamjwana kaNdaba inyoni ehlesi yethe sahle sinyabe ehlesi ethe sahle sinyabe ehlesi undaba ohle mhlawumbe ngiyabahwebi ungelengele kalingana ndaba wena omkhulu kakhulu ndaba ongangeso lakho ungangomphehlela nomaqhokazi uyibinda amagebe wena wedlovu bayede
And we'll continue our coverage way after the full view. Coming up at 9 o'clock, African Perspective. Host Aldrin St. Pierre joins me now. Aldrin, you, I guess, will be looking at the legacy of the departed king and I guess, you know, the rich Zulu culture and how things are done.
Well, certainly, and also we'll be speaking to Professor Paul Sithole, who is a social anthropologist, just to speak to us about the significance of having kingdoms under a democratic state, and also looking at what's currently happening on the continent as well, and how the continent has handled that particular transition. Look at Tanzania. We'll have a piece on Tanzania and their decision to abolish chiefdoms, and then while on the other end, you have some countries where there is this push to have more administrative powers for people who are the heirs of chiefdoms. And remember that, look at Zimbabwe, for instance, and the role that the chiefs play in Zimbabwe and how influential they are. Our foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, will also be in conversation with us as we have a world view on the legacy of King Goodwill Zwelithini.
All right, thank you very much, Aldrin. We look forward to that. Coming up at 9 o'clock here on the SABC News channel. All right, meanwhile, Grammy Award-winning musical group Ladysmith Black Mbambazo had also paid tribute to the AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu. The group had sent us a video clip singing the song Mbube, which means lion in isiZulu.
If you like nice things at a nice price, you'll love Nazo Meals. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Nazo rewards are here. Buy any medium or large meal to enjoy your share of 4 million guaranteed rewards. Redeeming is easy. Scratch your voucher to reveal a unique code and redeem your choice of guaranteed rewards. From travel vouchers, online shopping, online entertainment, family days out, and so much more. T's and C's apply. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Download the McDonald's app and unlock daily deals. Stand a chance to win 500 Rand Shell vouchers, Walton stationary online vouchers, and meal deals with Spin to Win Reloaded. T's and C's apply.
Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. This is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories.
It's the responsibility of journalists to hold those in power accountable.
Journalists who stick to their mandate and basically hold the line against all of these threats to democracy are the reason why people still trust the media.
Don't forget you can engage with us on social media using hashtag SABC Media Monitor. We'd love to hear from you.
Watch Media Monitor Sundays at 9 a.m.
On Network, we tell you all about how tech is changing everything.
Police officers in the UK are using new virtual reality platform to help train them in the use of taser stun guns.
We also need to start thinking about jobs of the future.
Understanding of technology is going to be critical for the future, not only in the tech industry, but in pretty much every industry. It's going to be essential to understand some part technology.
Join me, Siphumelele Zondi, as I discuss changes that come with new tech on Network every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
Wena wendlovu ayede abashongo la dumisa abashongo la dumisa abashongo wesuleli phezu bathi ushilo bandabakasho.
Well, we continue to look at the rich Zulu culture as we understand. At this particular hour, the royal family still conducting those rituals at the royal palace, of course, after the remains of the departed king earlier on this afternoon arrived at the royal palace. Ms. Shalom Bata is a royal Zulu historian, and she joins me now. A very good evening to you, Ms. Mbata. Thanks indeed for joining us on the program. I think, it would be great for us to go back and look at the Zulu monarch itself and the importance of, monarchs in a democratic South Africa and the importance thereof. Talk us a bit through the significance of that.
Before there was politics, before there was democracy in South Africa, even before there was apartheid, the royalty was there and it kept the peace and it kept order. And it gave people the compass to navigate their lives. So royalty and traditional leadership is very critical. It's just that of late, many people do not realize that in the rural areas, your first port of call is traditional leadership. There are no SAPS there. They are about 100 Ks away, 50 Ks away. However, in Duna, Nenkosi Yasendaweni are always on call. And they do everything. They become, the magistrates. They become everything that assists in regulating people's lives. I mean, that leadership is also then transported to Johannesburg as well, outside the kingdom, where there is a majority of Zulus. They rely a lot on traditional leadership. And like I'm saying, it's been there way before we had other types of government, whether it's democracies or, communism or socialism. It's been there, and it's something that every person, especially who grew up in the rural areas, can relate to. And that is why even now, they are still there, and they're going to be there as long as they are black people.
The preservation of the Zulu culture. We know that this coming December, it would have been the 50th anniversary of course, the departed king on this particular seat. I mean, how important is it going forward that the unity that was displayed within the Zulu culture continues even beyond, the departed king?
You know, if we were ever to imagine a life without traditional leadership, especially as the Zulu, life wouldn't be worth living. How would that be? It is unbelievable. We cannot comprehend, we cannot imagine life going on without Zulu traditional leadership. And I know their forthcoming king is coming in very comfortable, that his people as his subjects are more than willing to embrace him and to get his leadership and follow all the way through. So there is no way, you see, the Zulu way of life is centered around traditional leadership.
If at all, I think we all need a bit of education in this particular aspect. Most people have been asking the question about culturally, we know that Ukjalwa will take place with only just a handful of amabutho and selected members of the royal family, and there won't be any women present there. The role of women in this particular instance, could you educate us a bit on the role of women, especially at a time like this?
Well, in isiZulu, women are actually referred to as inzalabantu, meaning the people who bring life, who give birth to humanity. Therefore, when there's a funeral rites cannot happen without the women folk. They had a very, very important role to play. Let me give you a quick example. When you bury, the women folk are the ones to make sure that the corpse, whether it's His Majesty or a commoner, are in a state that is able to be buried, and they do the rites. Even when they get to the cemetery, the person who must be in the grave symbolically will be a female who's going to accept them, because the grave is like they're going to hand over this body or the soul to the next life. The same way they brought it into the planet, now they're taking it home. And they are the women folk again, who then inform the other ancestors, the other side, who are also women, to say, please receive so and so. They are on their way now. So His Majesty at the moment, it was his personal wish that it must be the men folk to go and then inter his remains. However, traditionally, women play a very critical role.
Thank you very much indeed for your time, Ms. Shalom Bata, joining us this evening, of course, a royal Zulu historian, talking to us about the history of the Zulu monarchy and, of course, the significance of preserving the Zulu culture, even after, of course, the departed king. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the program. So messages on the condolences continue to pour in as the AmaZulu nation prepare to bury the Isilo Samabandla in Goodwill Zwelithini. Our foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, compiled this report.
Ntonga kaBhekuzulu ifukuzane fukuzuba usuku lemini yabona ngomama sabandebeleni ubheja nodla bakayise phuma siqiwini kade bekuvalele ungalonde gakhabela.
With great humility, before we start, we've lost the king of the Zulu nation, our king Isilo Samabandla, and we are going to ask that we stand up and observe a moment of silence. Thank you.
And he related how he received the news of the passing of the king while he was in Morocco.
Early on, very early on, in the morning, I got a call from South Africa. And usually when somebody phones and they phone persistently, it's an indication that I really have to take the call. And that's when I heard the really devastating news about His Majesty the King Zwelithini.
The Motsepe Foundation is working with the traditional leaders around the country. In his interaction with the King, the CAF president has learned a lot.
We always used to joke and say, you are king for everybody. You are the king for all of us, black, white, all of us.
Prince Albert and Princess Charlene of Monaco expressed their sorrow, saying they have lost a friend. The Commonwealth has commended the King for the role he played in addressing the needs of his people. At the United Nations, the Secretary General conveyed his message.
We, of course, send our deepest and most sincere condolences to the King's family and his friends, and to all the people of South Africa, as well as the government of South Africa.
The former South African Deputy President and the current Executive Director of the UN Women says the passing of Ingonyama is a great loss to AmaZulu nation.
I would like to send my condolences to the family and to the Zulu nation. I know that the king was loved, and I hope that his burial and all the traditions that go with it will go well and peaceful.
Lesotho's Prince Seiso Bereng Seiso shared the same sentiments.
As neighbors, and not only as neighbors in terms of nations, but also as family friends, the demise, the passing of His Majesty has a sense of great loss to us as a family and to us as a nation. So we are perhaps in the process of accepting the sad news, and obviously sending our condolences not only to the family but to the entire AmaZulu nation, but obviously the South African nation, because they form a great part of the narrative of South Africa.
Sophie Mukwe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And earlier, SABC News reporter Samkele Maseko spoke to Izinduna on ukukhothama kwenkosi Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu.
We've since moved to JP's hostel to speak to the chairperson of Izinduna, Induna Uspiwe Mhlongo here in Gauteng. He's the chairperson of all the Izinduna here that are in Gauteng. And isiZulu uhlalo wazo zonke izinduna ezikhona lana eGauteng ngaphansi kwaso isizwe saso imbube esishile emhlabeni. Angizofaka yena manje induna uhlalo wezinduna Induna Uspiwe Mhlongo. Nduna akusichazele nje njengezinduna la eGoli eGauteng nizizwa kanjani ngokutshalwa kwembube namhlanje ntabama?
Bafowethu silimele kakhulu ngokuhanjelwa imbube. Sifisa nje ke egameni lenduna zonke zalapha esikhona eGoli ukukhalela indlunkulu, abantwana basendlunkulu, amazinyane esilo, indlunkulu nje ke yonkana. Ngamkhohle umntwana waphinda ngene ekuyena obe umsebenzi yakhe obelokho esebenze njalo sonke lesikhathi. Sikhala kakhulu, silimele kakhulu, siphucwe into yethu esikhonzile, siphucwe lapho esibusa khona impela, lapho esibuka khona njengoZulu.
Nduna mawubheka igalelo alidlalile ubheka Zulu, ubheka isimo ubhejane isimo abantu baseNingizimu Afrika abakusona nabantu abalana ehostel bazizwa kanjani bona ngokushiwa emhlabeni ngokukhothama kwaso isilo samabandla?
Kakhulukazi nje uvuselele yonke imikhosi eyayikhona ngaphambilini, Nkosi yoselwa yohlanga neminye, kanti ke futhi iqhaza elikhulu lakhe ukuthula ezweni ubekuphemba ukuthula ezweni nathi futhi ke esitshela kakhulu ukuthi akungaliwa nabanye abantu sibagweme nabasukela sibagweme empeleni okuningi nje kakhulu azisingakusho nenhlonipho nje ukuthi kufanele nibaziseni abanye abantu nibazisa abantu abadala inhlonipho nje into eyiphambili kakhulu asifundise yona nanokuthi ke asinamathele kakhulu emasikweni ethu njengoZulu sinamathele ngisho ulimini lwethu lolu njengoZulu siqhenye njengoZulu.
Mawubheka umlando wakhe uZulu uphinde ubheke negalelo alidlalile uphinde ubuke nezithombe esikhona namhlanje kwaNongoma ubona izintombi namabutho beyolanda umzimba wakhe emakhazeni bowubuyisela ekhaya kakhetho omthandayo ubheke nje negalelo alidlalile kulabantu yini ongafisa ukuthi abantu baseNingizimu Afrika besikhumbule ngaso isilo samamandla uBhejane?
Ngesingami nje bengifisa ngathi ngweshintshe lutho obekutshalwe ngonyama kuthina emqondini yethu empeleni ukuhlonipha amasiko ukuzazi ukuthi ungubani njengoZulu nanjengabo kuba umAfrika uqobo besifisa njengathi ke abantu bakithi banamathela kulokho bangabe namhlanje sebenza noma kanjani kanti besifundisiwe ongangizwe lakhe.
Sibonge ba unduna uDlamini ngilenthe enye induna ngalana ngizwe ukuthi bona njengabantu abahlala lana eJP ehostela nizizwa kanjani ngokukhothama kwembube izobekwa nasendlini yayo yokugcina namhlanje ntambama ngenkathi isitshalo?
Sizizwa ukudabuka okukhulu phela ukulahlekelwa ubaba ekhaya usuke udabuke kakhulu nesizwe la eJP ngeke ngasitshela nje kuthanga ukuthi ukuba impela silalela amazwi ebesishumayela ngawo sonke sisizwe sakwaZulu bekufanele ukuthi wonke umuntu asibone ukuthi thina amaZulu sidabuke kangakanani ngokulahlekelwa ingonyama ngoba ziningi izinto ebesiqwashisa ngazo kakhulu ukuvuselela nje amasiko lawa wentombi funa singakushiyi kakhulu lokho impela ukuvuselela ukuthi akube khona umkhosi omhlanga ngoba ikusasa lethu thina bantu abampisholo ukuthi kufanele phela ungakhohlwa mawusuka khona ufuna uhambe njengoba silana nje eGoli sazofuna imali kodwa amakhaya asekhaya asingathwe isilo samabandla onke.
Obheka amabutho ngenje kuba ehlangene hayi ngobuningi babo kodwa bona baphumile nje impela kwaNongoma njengamanje ukumphelezela ukuya kokhetho omthandayo ekhaya endlini yakhe yokugcina nina njengezinduna beningafisa ukuba beninikiwe leli thuba uba lolu bhubhane leCovid-19 alikho ukuthi nihlanganyele nonke niyophelezela imbube bekungaba njani nje ekhaya mobheka kuyimanje?
Kubhlungu kuyadabukisa kuyaphinda ukuthi kungabonakalisi ngaso lesimo seCovid ungabonakalisi ngoba lokhu ukuthi kuthiwe kufanele abantu abangaka izwe libona ngathi kukhotheme nje umuntu njengangami kanti kukhotheme umuntu ongangezwe lakhe.
Sibonge kakhulu baba singifake nje wena ekugcineni imbube bekhuluma kakhulu.
Thank you very much, SABC News reporter Samkele Masego. Meanwhile, a Grammy Award-winning musical group Ladysmith Black Mbambazo also paid a tribute to the departed king. Let's take a look.
Wena wendlovu thina la kuLadysmith Black Mbambazo sidabuke kakhulu ngokusithela kwelanga lamaZulu simkhumbula ongangezwe lakhe ngeziyalo ezinhle nezikhuthazo ukuthi sizithuthukise sibumbane njengesizwe sihlalisane kahle nabanye abantu futhi siziqhenye ngokuthi singamaZulu sithi endlunkulu nasemhlabeni wonke dudu alale kahle ongangezwe lakhe bayede wena wendlovu
If you like nice things at a nice price, you'll love Nazo Meals. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This whole music game is like a challenge.
Mamzo.
This whole music game is like a challenge. Sure, it's not much cheerleader, I look she like
Nazo. If you like nice things at a nice price, you'll love Nazo Meals.
Nazo.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. If you like nice things at a nice price, you'll love Nazo Meals. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
On Network, we tell you all about how tech is changing everything.
Police officers in the UK are using new virtual reality platform to help train them in the use of taser stun guns.
We also need to start thinking about jobs of the future.
Understanding of technology is going to be critical for the future, not only in the tech industry, but in pretty much every industry. It's going to be essential to understand some part technology.
Join me, Siphumelele Zondi, as I discuss changes that come with new tech on Network every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
On Stories Untold, we travel far and wide to bring you stories packed with hope and inspiration.
I don't need to rely on government, I don't need to rely on anything, but if I can speak life into my situation and do not doubt what I say, but believe that what I say will happen, I will have whatever I say.
Stories of compassion.
And when I realized that there are people that go through 10 times worse things than me, I realized that I have a family, I have everything I need to be the person that I need to be.
Stories of Ubuntu.
I can honestly tell you the community, I think they have given me that extra boost to try and uplift other people's lives.
Stories of resilience.
When the door of me wanting to become a civil engineer didn't happen because of lack of financial background at that time, so I had to kick another door. When it was opened, then cycling was there.
Watch Stories Untold every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
Wena wendlovu ayete abashongo la dumisa abashongo la dumisa abashongo wesuleli phezu bathi ushilo bandabakasho.
Those earlier pictures of the maidens and Amabutho, the Zulu warriors accompanying the remains of the departed king to the Royal Palace. So the Royal Zulu family, we understand, is at the Sawa conducting private ceremonies and rituals ahead of the ukutshalwa of the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu, which will be later tonight. This will be followed by a memorial on Thursday, which will be addressed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And let's go straight now to Simpiwe Makhanya. He is KwaNongoma, and I understand he's not too far from the Royal Palace. KwaKheto Mthandayo. A very good evening to you, Simpiwe. Thanks indeed for joining us. It's been a long day for you and the rest of our colleagues there. Do we know if those rituals are still underway at the Royal Palace at this particular time?
Evening to you, Criselda, and evening to the viewers. Certainly, Criselda, it has been a long and historic day here at KwaNongoma. Just where we are, Criselda, we are actually not far from KwaKheto Mthandayo Royal Palace, where we believe that any minute from now, those rituals will then begin ahead of the planting of King Goodwill Zwelithini. Earlier on, Criselda, when we were at KwaKheto Mthandayo Royal Palace, we saw quite a number of dignitaries who made their way as part of basically bidding farewell to King Goodwill Zwelithini, because what we do know and what has been confirmed to us is that his burial or his send-off will actually take place at night. It's not clear whether it's midnight or just after midnight, but that's the communication which came from Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who is the Prime Minister, saying that according to the late King's wishes, he actually said that he wanted to be laid to rest at night. A lot has happened, Criselda, as you have said in your introduction, in the build-up to today, where we saw quite a number of people, religious leaders, various organizations, as well as political party leaders making their way to KwaKheto Mthandayo Royal Palace, where basically everything has been happening since the announcement of the departure of AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini. Criselda?
Simpiwe, from the scenes that we saw, I think, thousands would have wanted to, attend and even pay homage to the departed king. And it must be increasingly difficult, because we also understand from Amabutho, who were accompanying the remains of the departed king, as well as the maidens, there would have been many more in terms of what we understand. But due to COVID-19, there had to be a certain level of management in terms of how all of this was going to unfold. Talk to us a bit about what you saw, and I guess how difficult it was, in particular, because we're talking about this particular departed king.
Certainly, Criselda, it was always going to be a challenge for law enforcement authorities to actually see to it that those COVID-19 regulations are adhered to in terms of the number of people gathering in one particular place. Because I can tell you that according to the visuals that we have seen also, that the Amabutho were basically in their numbers, out in their numbers. Some of them, Criselda, were not wearing their mask as it was seen on television. It was always going to be an issue, the issue of basically seeing to it that those who attend this particular part of send-off adhere to the regulations. But indeed, Criselda, a lot of people, even on social media, have been expressing their basically sadness, and some of them, appreciating the work that they say the late King Goodwill kaBhekuzulu has done for AmaZulu at large. He has been hailed as a leader who was very brave when it comes to the issue of confronting those who are tasked with leading government, denouncing acts of corruption, and as well as, just basically fighting for the rights of ordinary South Africans to be respected. Criselda.
Simpiwe, I'm going to let you go. It's been a very long day for you and the rest of our colleagues. I know tomorrow as well, with the memorial service, we're expecting, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa to deliver a eulogy at that memorial service, which will be taking place tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed to all of you there. A former Deputy President and UN Women's Executive Director, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, has sent her condolences to the Zulu royal family and the nation at large ahead of King Goodwill Zwelithini's burial later today. In a brief conversation with the SABC's Show and Bryce piece, she also floated the idea of a future queen.
Executive Director, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
King Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu will be laid to rest later tonight. How did you come to hear of the King's passing and your reaction to the loss, not only for the Zulu nation, but more broadly, the people of South Africa?
Well, I received the sad news from the media and from people from home. And I would like to send my condolences to the family and to the Zulu nation. I know that the king was loved, and I hope that his burial and all the traditions that go with it will go well and peaceful.
You've, of course, worn many hats in the past, a former minister in South Africa, a former deputy president. I imagine you've had interactions with King Goodwill Zwelithini. Can you recall those interactions and what can you say about them?
Yeah, I actually interacted with His Majesty a lot when I was Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and when I was Minister of Minerals and Energy. He was interested in supporting women's economic empowerment in his kingdom. He was looking for advice and for opportunities for women in KwaZulu-Natal.
The King's been described, Executive Director, as a champion of peace, a custodian of Zulu traditions and customs, a much-loved visionary. I wonder what you can say in your current role as the Executive Director of UN Women, the leader of, or a custodian in your own right of, the women's equality agenda. What can you say at this moment, given the significance of this passing and a future that you work so hard to achieve?
Well, at this time, when KwaZulu-Natal is generally a peaceful place, as you know, Sherwin, there was a time when it was not a peaceful place, but we managed to stabilize. We're in a good place for culture to evolve, for tradition to evolve in line with the aspirations that we have for our people, our communities, our women. So I am hoping that this will be a time for renewal and that we will use this time to strengthen our communities in line with our constitution as well. And who knows, we might even get a queen, which will be something that will be phenomenal.
I'm going to allow you to say a final word in Zulu.
Ngizocela ukudlulisa indunduzo emndenini nasesizweni. Ngithi akwehlanga olukungehlanga. Ngifisa ukuthi umsebenzi wokutshala inkosi uhambe kahle ngokuthula. Nokuthi siphathane kahle siqhubeke sakhe isizwe mhlambe size sizibone sesinayo nendlovukazi.
Executive Director, as always, we thank you for your time and appreciate sharing your sentiments with us.
Wena wendlovu ayete abashongo la dumis abashongo la dumis abashongo wesuleli pesi bathi ushilo bandabakasha.
If you like nice things at a nice price, you'll love Nazo Meals. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. When your property is struck by protest,
rocked by a riot, traumatized by terrorism. All's well that ends well when you have Sastria's unique special risk cover. It's like turning back time at unexpectedly low cost. When things go bad, Sastria makes good. Ask your broker or insurer about Sastria's unique cover today.
Immerse yourself in the possibilities that could be with Lotto, Lotto Plus 1 and Lotto Plus 2. Tune into the Draw Show every Wednesday on SABC 2.
Download the McDonald's app and unlock daily deals. Stand a chance to win 500 Rand Shell vouchers, Walton stationary online vouchers, and meal deals with Spin 2 and Reloaded. T's and C's apply.
Wena wendlovu ayethe abashongo la dumisa abashongo la dumisa abashongo wesuleli phezu bathi ushilo bandabakasha.
The AmaZulu king has been hailed as a great king and a solid bond uniting his people. The historian Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa shared the historic links between the people of the Kingdom of Lesotho and the Kingdom of AmaZulu.
Dr. Peter Siboni, a historian, a South African historian himself, in his researches finds that actually the Basotho used to send military expatriates to Natal to instruct the Zulu warriors on what was called mounted warrior warfare. So they were the ones that were introduced horses to the Zulus and guns, and they would tell them, guys, this thing of these huge fronts no longer works because these guys have got cannons and are going to decimate you, you know. So there was a relationship that was ongoing even beyond King Shaka. Monarchy is the very essence of the national existence of the African people because it is their socio-economic formation administration. Monarchy is the fiber that holds the nations, African nations, especially Bantu nations, are very monarchic. It's the very essence of their existence. Now, what has happened is that, yes, monarchy has been threatened because, for example, in Lesotho, the British, after 1868, after they took over the reins, they found out of the so-called protectorate that actually now was becoming a colony. Because the deal between the British and Mushweshwe was clear. You just hold off the Boers. Otherwise, we are okay here. You know what I mean? Do not interfere with my way of governance, etc. So, yes, monarchy is in trouble, has been in trouble for a while. In fact, the fact that monarchy still exists anywhere in Africa, it's a miracle. Especially in Southern Africa. And I'm personally very proud of the Zulu monarchy and the Swazi monarchy. To a large extent, they have retained, of course, not in different degrees, but the culture that you see, the ability to mobilize their nations, those two kings are, I think, and in fact the culture, because it has retained the culture of those people. You see it in their manner of dress. They are not ashamed, you know what I mean, of their, and thus they influence the whole nation, you know what I mean, to be patriotic. So monarchy has been the cornerstone of our existence, and precisely because you understand, for example, in Lesotho, the British or the Boers have never defeated the Basotho when they were under their kings. You know, because the regimentation of the nation of Basotho, the mobilization, the organization was very high. Because of the monarchic system, which goes down up to the small chief in a small village, you know, who could be called to service at the blink of the eye, and he would report at Tababusiu, you know what I mean? You know? So because of that, we're a highly organized nation. Monarchies have a tendency in Africa to organize, to put a high level of organization in nations. And that helps not only in military times, when people have to go to war, but also it organized the economic development of Lesotho. Owes the Lesotho we are talking about, Lesotho under King Mushweshwe until King Lirotodi, was considered an economic hub in Southern Africa. That's why the Basotho are the ones who used to export grain to Kimberley. The Basotho agriculturists were even more advanced than the Boers. They exported martin to Kimberley because the economic system, the system under the monarchy, was very efficient. For example, the wheat would be grown under what was called matsima. You know what I mean? Large-scale farming. Mind you, there were no tractors. We are talking about hoeing and labor-intensive and the wealth in sheep. In fact, to the extent that a decision was made in Britain to stop importing wheat from Lesotho because the Basotho were getting too rich. And wheat then was exported from Australia. And martin, that's why Australia is where it is today. Otherwise, the economy of Lesotho would have surpassed that of South Africa easily. Okay, fine, let's say South Africa, there was diamonds, really, okay, there was gold. But forget not, agriculture is a real economic factor also. And so these are things that happened under the monarchies. The societies were organized, the social life was good because, small courts at the smallest of villages, was able to handle. That's why you never had too many people in prisons, in the true Lesotho. You know what I mean? Only the worst of criminals, were in prison. And the prisons were very small, I am happy that the whole thing is approached in that manner. That the king will be buried in the wee small hours of the morning, by men only, in the Zulu way. It's the way that Africa should be. I rest in peace, my king, Cyril. I think he has done well. I personally don't care about politics. I would say as a king, he has represented himself very well. I look at the Zulu people with envy when they are in their dress, and they are with their king, and I've seen praise poets around him. He makes me proud of Africa. He made me proud of Africa, my Africa. So it's with the deepest respect that I extend my condolences to the Zulu people in general and to his family. He was a great man. He was a great African.
Where are we heading as Africa, taking to one Africa, and maybe looking up to the kings, maybe to take us back where we were very proud as a nation?
The reality of the matter is that so far we have not had our own Berlin Conference. The African kings have not sat down and drawn their Africa. So far, the Africa that we find ourselves in, the geographic Africa, is the Africa that was drawn in the Berlin Conference. So where I am is, sadly, very sadly, because some of us had thought that post-1994, there were going to be negotiations, kings, chiefs, finding one another and discussing the real issues of Africa. For example, we have a situation where there's been land demarcations, where some farms had been given to people, where there's been... My feeling is that even this forever troublesome border situation, which has led even to people in Lesotho having drowning in the river because there are border posts, where they are not going to be allowed for one reason or the other. And where I stand, I think that there is not going to be true liberation in South Africa or in Southern Africa before the kings and the chiefs of Southern Africa have settled down, sat on the table and discussed, one, the relationships of the African people. And for people to understand this, they have to understand the history of Africa. Africa needs to understand itself because so far people have been told what they are. We do not know our history. And precisely because of that, we are always seeing ourselves as different entities. When indeed, most of the Basotho are Botswana. Even the royal family that is now ruling us, you know what I mean? They are of Mfurutsi descent. You know what I mean? So they are Botswana. So people don't know this. They don't know that Bapedi also are Botswana. Bapedi, Magolokwe, Basia, Batlokwa, they are born of Mokhatla, son of Tabani. Who is a Botswana? So because of these demarcations, and we are to blame really because we did not change our own curricula. Even the Basotho, look, Lesotho has the most glorious history in Southern Africa. It's a fact. It's not a boast. The Basotho are the only people who have defeated every other nation, including the British and the Boers. This is a fact. But you see, people still point at Basotho as those guys across the river there. When the reality of the matter is that the cross-section, Basotho is a cross-section of each and every nationality in Southern Africa. You see, we have more than 5 Nguni nationalities in South Africa, different Ngunis. You know what I mean? We have the clans and the tribes that we call each other, which including the vendors. You see, in Lesotho. You see? So they'll be calling themselves Batlong. But you hear that they are Batlong who are Nguni and then they are Batlong who are not Nguni. You see? But we don't know these things. South Africans don't know these things, even after liberation. That's why they're able to look at other Africans and think they are different from them because of the Berlin Conference, because of the 1910 conference. You know what I mean? That actually made the Union of South Africa. So it is only our ignorance. It is our ignorance that makes us fight one another, jealous of one another. Or if those things are dealt with, if we are armed with our history, re-armed with our history, understand who we are, bring our kings and chiefs back to their normal space, have them discuss with us and with one another, and then and only then can we have a true Africa. For now, we're still joking. Even the land question in South Africa, the way it's being addressed, the land question, you cannot address the land question without including the kings and chiefs. From whom was that land taken from? Because Africans, individuals, never owned land. It was taken from African kings and chiefs.
All right, we want to talk a bit more about burial rights. Professor Ndela Ntshangase is an analyst on that and also joined from our Durban studios with him, Dr. Gugu Mazibuko, talking about the legacy of the departed king. Dr. Mazibuko, I want to start with you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Just looking back just a few moments ago, my colleague Sherwin Bryce-Peace had conducted an interview with the Director of Human Women, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, and she seemed to have flouted the idea of a future queen. Is that even possible within the Zulu culture? I think let's start there.
Good evening. Although I may not say much about the future queen, because that is those are the discussions that usually take place inside the royal palace, and it's the royal family who discuss who the next king would be. So I cannot dwell much on that because those are the private affairs of the royal family.
And I totally respect that. Yes, please continue.
Yes, but however, talking about the legacy of the late king, there's a lot that he has done for the nation, especially the preservation of cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible heritage. We will also remember him for the peace initiatives, because during the time when he took the throne, the nation was engulfed by many challenges. However, he was able to be a peacemaker without taking any side, even in politics, but he was welcoming everyone in the monarch. And our king, King Goodwill Zwelithini, he was involved in development, in developing the Zulu nation, and he had passion for education, agriculture, and even the health of his people, because he made sure that the young men are circumcised, and the young girls, the reed dance is organized for them so that they can pride themselves as pure and as girls that can abstain and cannot experience a number of challenges that young girls experience today, like early pregnancy and the HIV and AIDS virus.
Yeah. Prof, perhaps let me bring you in there. I mean, looking at the legacy of the king, what are some of the highlights you think he will be remembered with, and also the impact that he had during his reign?
Good evening. Yes, I'm glad that you are asking that question, because I think that is a very important question. The legacy of the king, if I may just mention some few points, there are many points that one can say. When he came into throne in 3rd December 1971, the situation in South Africa, more so concerning the black people, the apartheid system was at its peak. So you understand, let me not dwell on that one. He himself, he had limited powers, but this is what he had done. He was, and up until his death, the peace initiator person. In other words, he liked peace. Whenever there was a conflict, be it a conflict of words, be it a conflict of ideas which had the potential of leading into a war. He used to go there when he was young himself, just to listen and also try and resolve that. And the other thing is, of course, whenever, let me come closer now to the era where perhaps most of us may remember. South Africa, just before the liberation, which occurred in 1994, South Africa was engulfed by a violent situation. And he shouted at the top of his voice, saying that people stop fighting. The fight was mainly between the ANC followers and the IFP followers, but he did not take any side. He will shout and sometimes even stamp a table with the back of his hand, saying that you people of my father, meaning my people, stop fighting. I'm not siding with any one of you, but stop fighting. That's him. He's a man of peace, and I think those examples, there are more, but those are just enough. He will be remembered again by reviving the traditional ceremonies, in which those ceremonies, they were there before him, but when he came into throne, they were no longer practiced. Here I can count the much loved one and the much famous one, the so-called reed dance, Umkhosi Umhlanga, which he revived the same ceremony in 1984, and followed by the others. I'm just going to mention three. The other ceremony that he revived was the Ukubuthwa Kwezinsizwa, which I believe is the only one thus far in Africa who is still doing that. That is the appointment of a regiment, where the young men will be told that they must not abuse their strength and so forth against women or innocent people or even children. And that is the ceremony where, having been taught, then they will go into a kraal with a black bull and be expected to kill such an animal in the blink of an eye, and with their hands. And that is still another thing that we'll be remembering him with. And in addition, in conclusion, perhaps I'm just going to mention two now. He is the person who, in his heart, he fought this pandemic called AIDS and the AIDS pandemic that I'm talking about. And then he will call this within Umhlanga and educate the young ones, telling them that they must not engage themselves into sexual activities whilst young and not end up there. He is known to have revived as well the circumcision of boys for various reasons. And above all, he is the figure that has been well known throughout the world.
Yeah.
And this has been seen now when he is dead, as many people have been surprised that the messages of condolences are coming all over the globe. That's the king in brief, his legacy. There are more one could say,
Yes.
but I don't want to be that long because of the limited time.
Absolutely. And perhaps, Doctor, I can bring you in there. Not just that, the departed king was obviously concerned about some of, the other issues plaguing South Africa, issues of gender-based violence. And I guess whosoever then, I've had this conversation with our previous guests, whosoever then does take over the reins would need to deal with some of the pressing issues that South Africa is facing. The preservation of the Zulu culture is equally important, but the challenges facing the nation as a whole is also something that the departed king was very concerned about.
Yes. The king, my colleague mentioned the ceremonies that the king revived. One of the most important ceremony that the king revived is the Umkhosi Wesivivane, which is a ceremony for women, where women are educated on many issues, including gender-based violence, including their rights, including how to deal with family issues. I think it's very important to note that women and children were also at the heart of the king.
Absolutely. So you indicated much earlier on in the interview, of course, that issues pertaining to succession are things that will be discussed by the royal family themselves. But how soon are we expected to hear? Because obviously I think in the beginning you would recall that the Prime Minister had indicated the reason why they had announced the departing of the king was because they did not want to leave a vacuum. So I guess that will be top of mind as well once, I guess, these particular ceremonies are out of the way. The succession would be an issue. How soon are we likely to hear of a successor in this regard?
Let's be patient. Let us wait for the royal family to sit down. And we must also remember that this is the mourning period.
Yes.
So we must give them time to finalize the discussions amongst themselves, and then they announce to the nation. We need to be patient and respect that these issues are dealt with, and these are dealt with in a special way, and they are sensitive issues that we need to respect the space that the royal family occupy.
Professor, perhaps I can also bring you in there on the issues of, the respect for Zulu culture and the richness thereof. The departed king had always, and that was a sentiment shared by many of those who were very close to him, in that he made sure that at all times peace reigned, at all times the richness of the Zulu culture was preserved. So I guess then, while we cannot speak about succession at this particular time, whosoever then does take over the reins would need to do much more than that.
Yes, you are right. Let me rather come in this way. There are some of the people who are worried that whatever the preservation of culture that you are talking about, that he revived under difficult circumstances, perhaps now are going to start to diminish when the new succession person take the thrones. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. You see, when he revived the culture that we are talking about, it became a uniting force to the Zulu nation on its own. Not only to the Zulu nation on its own, even some other nations. In the history that you opened up with, the person who was talking there did mention that culture is a uniting force. He spoke of the Basotho and so forth. A similar thing here. I don't think that it's going to diminish. It's going to remain, instead of diminishing, it's going to grow. Because he himself, when he was doing this, people saw that culture, what it does to them, it tells them their identity, and it also gives them the sense of belonging, to know who one is, and then where one belongs, and so forth, and becomes proud of himself and or herself, and so forth. So I don't think it's going to diminish, because even the younger ones, it did not exclude them in these ceremonies that we are talking about. They were also there, the youth, and you have seen this on your own if you were watching the television, that even now, at the where they are now, Waketomtanda, there are young girls there as well. They've not been excluded. Young boys as well have not been excluded, and they are learning a lot and lot. And above all, there are still other elderly people who understand this, that he was working with. So I don't think it will diminish, but it will grow rather than diminish.
Professor Ndela Ntshangase, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the program this evening, joined by Dr. Gugu Mazibuko, also talking about the legacy of the departed king. To you both, thank you very much for joining us here on the SABC.
Kukhona uNkulunkulu ikhathi ayibonayo yena ukuthi uyababiza abakhe ngekhathi zakhe futhi ngekuyiphikisa ngoba because but once you were born, you must know you have to die. Uma unovalo lokuthi uyokufa ngelinye ilanga, inkinga phela ngoba wazalwa. Mawazalwa nje, you have to go one day. Kodwa ungakahambi kuthi ngeke ubuke isigaba sokuyiphatha ukuthi uyiphethe kanjani.
Wena wendlovu, ayede abashongo la dumisa, abashongo la dumisa, abashongo wesuleli phezu, bathi ushilo bandabakasho.
So it's a bit of a celebration, if you want to call it that, because yes, the dynasty continues in as far as His Majesty's passing is concerned. But let's give you some sports right now,
All right.
Well, as Griselda said, let's give you a bit of sports news now regarding the King. King Goodwill Zwelithini will be remembered by many as a monarch who worked very hard to change the lives of his people. CAF President, the newly minted CAF President, that is, Dr. Patrice Motsepe, says the passing of the King is a great loss to, well, the South African public. Our foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, spoke to Dr. Motsepe earlier, a couple of days ago.
King Zwelithini was a king for all of us. Very caring, very loving, loved development. I had a privilege to work with him for many, many, many years. And it was very sad that on the day in the morning when I was informed of his departure, a few minutes afterwards was when I had to go and make announcements as the new president of CAF. So it was a very sad day, but we have to continue to keep his memory alive and his commitment to all of the people in the country. He was a king for all of us. And also, we will continue with the projects in KwaZulu-Natal and various other partnerships that we had with him. And he will always occupy a very special place in our hearts and minds. And it's important to touch the lives of as many of our people as possible in terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities, but also in terms of education, in the context of thousands of our young boys and girls who are worried about the universities that are opening, and there's a duty on all of us.
Mr. Motsepe, your foundation worked with the King very well, and not only him, but other traditional leaders as well. Do you think this will continue?
Yeah, well, it has to continue. And it's one humble way to keep his memory alive. We are made as the Motsepe family. We are what we are because of the people of this country and the people of the continent. And we have an ongoing obligation, the same commitment we show towards developing and growing our businesses. We have to show the same commitment towards upliftment, jobs, creating hope and a better future for the poor and the marginalized. Otherwise, we don't have a future.
He was a king for all. Tributes continue to pour in the sporting front. We are now joined by Mr. Sandile Zungu, owner of AmaZulu Football Club. Manzini ngikwamukele kwizindaba ze-SABC. Sibonge impela ukuthi wenze ithuba lokuthi ukhulume nathi. Mhlawumbe siqale lapho Manzini, sinzwile uDokotela uPatrice Motsepe saying, like many of us, thina besilo ngiyazi ukuthi nawe kanye nani futhi nibuhlungu ngokukhothama kwesilo samabandla ubayede uZwelithini kaBhekuzulu.
Thank you so much for having me here. Indeed, the loss is very deep. It's heartfelt among people who consider themselves to be his subjects. In the sporting fraternity, we at AmaZulu Football Club are deeply hurt by His Majesty's untimely passing. Clearly, there are people who, even though we all know we are mere mortals, but people that you wish they could just live on and on and on. And he is one of those people. AmaZulu Football Club had a special relationship with His Majesty the King, Goodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu. In October last year, when I was looking at buying into the ownership of the team. I spoke to Dr. Evan Khoza, who said, Sandile, noble effort, but have you spoken to His Majesty? Was I advised that you speak to him and approach your discussions with him with an open mind. If he gives you the blessings, move with speed. If his blessings are not forthcoming, accept it, but don't do anything. And indeed, I then called him to advise him of my intentions and to seek his blessings. I don't want to use the word improperly, but he was over the moon about the prospective change of hands and me buying into the team. And so he gave the blessings. And the last 6 months have been the ones where I've been basking in the glory of His Majesty's blessings.
Indeed.
And I really believe that over and above just mere preparation and application by the players and the technical team, that His Majesty's blessings account in part for the run of form, great run of form that we have had. So his untimely departure is a deep and heartfelt loss by us.
Yeah, indeed.
I don't want to lie.
Yeah, indeed, Geta. In fact, I was just thinking to myself, Kwabini, on the log you're sitting, I think, in top 6 as a club. In past years and years gone by, AmaZulu FC struggled a little bit. The history, though, AmaZulu FC, Kanye Nopecha and Pumis Kawini, is a long one. I mean, we know Gutusu to play at Princess Makoko Stadium, but Pinde Badlale at King Zwelithini Stadium. The history there is beyond what some of us who are young ones, if I can put it that way, actually understand and believe in, or know, if I can put it that way.
When the team was established in 1932, currently, we're the oldest team in the DSTV Premier Soccer League. When we were established in 1932, the then reigning monarch was the grandfather of King Goodwill Zwelithini. It was Solomon Gadinuzulu, Unkaisha Nagamenzi. He invited the founders of the team to come to KwaZulu-Natal Palace at Nongoma. And he said, use the names Zulu Royals with pride. I endow this team with the full blessings of the monarch. And subsequently it was renamed AmaZulu Football Club. So we have always considered ourselves as the nation's team. And from time to time, AmaZulu will go to, the leadership of AmaZulu Football Club will go to the Royal Palace just to apprise the king of the progress that the team is making. Small victories by the team, such as winning Coca-Cola Cup in 1992, such as winning the then National Premier Soccer League in 1972, were followed by visits to the palace at KwaZulu-Natal to share the joy with the monarch.
Yes.
We were actually looking forward to visiting His Majesty the King during the international break. Yeah. When last I spoke to him, it was in December. We had hoped that we'll bring Benny McCarthy, Monip Josephs, and Siyabonga Nomvet with Spiwe Shabalala, among other senior players, to KwaNongoma to introduce them to the king. But he was obviously of a mind that, look, it will be improper given that we're in the middle of the second wave. And we both agreed that at the next opportunity during the international break, we'll duly visit the king,
yes,
which unfortunately we have not been able to do. So I suppose the point I'm making is the relationship between the monarchy and AmaZulu Football Club is deep, it's long, it's rich.
Babu Sandile Zungu Manzini, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. And what does one say in that instance? And as you said, Usu may they continue to prosper, in particular in the league. I know it's a home team that I know for myself. I grew up supporting AmaZulu, being from Maritzburg. And let me come back to my colleague Griselda Lewis. Griselda, I mean, what does one do with after that conversation? I mean, it's the conversation we're having. There's only good words that people, have to say about Silo Samabanda, and I guess that's just one of those things.
Oh, absolutely, and we expect more of that at the memorial service. Of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa delivering the eulogy there, and I guess, thousands of other people would have wanted to pay tribute, but unfortunately, the times that we're in really does not permit that, but we'll try and do our best to get as much coverage as possible on this. Tabiso, thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. Indeed. SABC2, our sister channel, will be covering this. So for our viewers watching now on SABC News channel, do stay tuned. We have it on.
All right. Thank you very much, Tabiso Sitole. They're joining us on the program this evening. Aldrin St. Pierre is up next. We continue our coverage. He'll be looking at the significance of monarchs on the African continent. For myself, Griselda Lewis, and Tabiso Sitole, good night.
Wena wendlovu thina la kuleli simeko lemabazo sidabuke kakhulu ngokusithela kwelanga lamaZulu simkhumbula ongangezwe lakhe ngeziyalo ezinhle nezikhuthazo ukuthi sizithuthukise sibumbane njengesizwe sihlalisane kahle nabanye abantu futhi siziqhenye ngokuthi singamaZulu sithi endlunkulu nasemhlabeni wonke dudu alale kahle ongangezwe lakhe bayede wena wendlovu
inabe nkashana meze phuzumla sakameva nabaqobo vula ngedolo sayiza shela inkomo soshakane sulu kaMageba Zulu wakhona umagebe lanya undaba lanya ujama kwathi ujama saluseza khona salumudlalo sasojisa kwathi senza khona salushaka ushakelanya udingane lanya umpande kwathi umpande sacetshwa salishingane kwacetshwa zadinusulu Solomon saluBhekuzulu saluswelithini ngidinabe nkashana meze phuzumla sakameva nabaqamla ngenkomba ifusa umdlebe lahlilwa soshangane nabe connect inkohlelo simashiya kushawusula zashana impi yakhe isibula ndaba lashela uPeter different udana kwamabhunu naba kwazulu umnyama ukuthanda ukwazi inkomo zamadoda inabesilo wena wendlovu bayede ushange sabuthi ushange usasemashobeni utekula abafazi bawonomgabi babetekula behleze emlovini bethi ushaka ibusa abankosi ekathi kunyane sawunethezeka udlungwane kandaba udlungwane ombelebele odlunge emanqulubeni kwazi kwasemanquluma masabekelana ilembe leqamanye amale vocal phakalo unodume ehlezi kamenzi ushaka sishaka njengamanzi umlilo uthathele kamjwana kandaba umlilo oshiso buhanguhangu oshise iconface emabedlana kwakwasha nayisodlebe inkomo ekhala emthotsheni isosonke sizwe lokulila isibona kumancenge ezokwakhali isibona ngududwa seliyengweni inyathe ejama umfoto phezulu komsimfubu azamaphoda isaba nokuyehlela intethe khona somkhoto abalandela emkhulu abashisa inqini imbewu bashiya emahlangeni izalwa sele emanqiweni amaqhega sele emsireni isiquse mithi iphenduka umbhedo wazabheka phezulu unoma khweli ngonyama umahlomo ohlathi njengohlanya uhlaliswe emehlweni amadoda noma shofshofu gasenza khona undaba sithi afeke senza khona ugaqala bovu nasekuphathweni ubholo qobaza ulukaniswa ngeke kodwa bhaste kona nditombile ikhishwa lemhlapha wona bebisela emthandeni beyisela bethe sikesina nentola sehla kanti uzadluphathwa impendelweni ufuma ufumana kandaba ufuma uluphepe udlungwana wafumana uvumelene ugodolosi ethi ngonganene kwanadi kanti kodwa wantombasana amazibabile ngwabongayo ngeke kampandela abantu kadunga nkomo bethu ucuwahlana entanyeni akeni sibisele basenkondeni bethu khila bomhlaba amahlokohloko kwafama sofa ucwephe wabuza isindlela kudunjwa engabe ibuza umbosana wadluleni nomaganga lafika iqhudela mvimbele odabule kuphusana phezulu wakhethela udwendo lamaswa wadlula kumcophe goduka ungasobathi valeso njalo abasho kona kandaba basho kunyoko umblasi okuye yena uvale ngonyama endlini laphuma ilanga lesensizwa khethise phezulu lantsatsa ilanga liphahleni ngemsebe ngoba ilanga lasemthandeni okhweza labantwana zulu elinyama lesehlomile ngabathala kuphela baza kusibalekela nguDunjo wadela imthandanisile owakha amanqo phezu kothukela lapho ucushwa isilo ngombo.
If you like nice things at a nice price, you'll love Nazo Meals. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Lotto, Lotto Plus 1 and Lotto Plus 2 are changing ordinary lives into millionaires. We do it again this Saturday. Catch the draw show on SABC 2.